If the alarm goes off, we know what to do, which is
Stay
put, and we'll be told what to do. I'm not making this up, that's what we do, what we have to do. So, there's a TV program that was on for a short amount of time called Jeopardy Masters. I don't know if anybody watched it. It was the all-time champions of Jeopardy competing. And I forget the category, excuse me, but this was the answer to a question. It's not hard, it's an interest granted by deed to use land owned by another for a specific limited purpose, like a right-of-way. Does anybody know what the answer was for that? Easement. That's what we're going to hear about today, is easement. So maybe you didn't know the answer because Christine's going to spend some time telling you. So let me just stop what I'm doing and give you Larry, who's going to introduce Christine, who will give her presentation. And as usual, we'll hold questions to the end and I'll circulate with the microphone. There's 2 microphones up there.
Is there a mic standing? Other than the stand? Great.
I'll just walk away first.
Yeah. Don't forget where you got it. So thank you, Dave, for your usual custom-made introduction. I'm going to remind you that there will be a 19th presentation in September, and we'll have the privilege of hosting one of our own, a recent resident named Peter Roberts, who I think I saw in the audience. There he is. Yes, thank you. So it'll be in September, so you should just keep an eye out for details as the time approaches.
What's the subject?
Do we want to tell people what the subject is yet, Peter?
Sure. It's going to be Ulster County Bluestone.
The bluestone industry of Ulster County, which is now moribund, more or less, but for a number of years, and I guess the late 19th, early 20th centuries, it was a very thriving industry. Anyway, so today we have the pleasure of being addressed by Christy Orr, and she is the Executive Director of the Wallkill Valley Land Trust, a position she has held since 2009. In that capacity, she oversees all the organization administration in the protection of Ulster County's open spaces, trails, and farms. In the past decade, Christy has managed completion of 16 land preservation projects and facilitated several capital improvement campaigns, including the 4-year, $1.5 million Rosendale Trestle Restoration Project. And that was in partnership with the Open Space Institute, known to some folks as OSI. She oversees a small staff of 2.
4, I messed up, it's 4 now.
Oh. Multiply over them. Anyway, before they get any bigger, let me say that she works, of course, with her board of directors, one of whom is in the audience today, way in the back. Bill?
Hello.
I believe I'm correct in saying that another member of her board is also on the board of Woodland Pond, that being Sally Cross. So anyway.
Who is in the back? Bill Houston is in the back. And
Now
he's running.
he's coming forward.
I'm the silent partner.
Not quite silent, but anyway. In any case, Christy also works with local municipalities and regional land protection organizations. I'm pleased to say that I was once on the board of one of those, Friends of the Shanga, and I think you probably still work with them. Anyway, Christy holds an MA in teaching and an MS in environmental policy from Bard College. She has over 20 years of experience in environmental conservation, and she lives in Accord with her small farm of rescue animals. Please welcome Christy.
Thank you very much, Larry. So I want to check. Can you all hear me? I'm not going to move. I'm usually loud, but I also talk fast. So if I get going, wave at me and I'll slow down because I get excited. But Larry told me to get slowly excited. So I'm gonna try. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm gonna try and do this without moving. The Wallkill Valley Land Trust is a nonprofit organization doing land protection here in Ulster County. Larry mentioned Open Space Institute, and we're similar to them. We're just a lot smaller, and we partner with them on land preservation projects. We work with willing landowners to put conservation easements on their property, and we also own land that is open to the public. This is one of our properties, which I will talk more about shortly, Jotunberg Mountain in Rosendale. The organization was formed in 1987, and today we have over 3,000 acres of permanently protected land here in Ulster County. I'm gonna try the pointer. Oh, it's exciting. Over here in the blue are our conservation easements. Some of our earliest easements, the landowners live here at Woodland Pond. Some of you know Trina Green. She was our very first conservation easement, and she lives here now in Woodland Pond, and Woodland Pond is one of our conservation easements. Another one of our more recent projects was the Ann and Ray Smith conservation easement in Gardner, and that protects a habitat of box turtles. And when I came to speak at Woodland Pond many years ago, I talked about the Ray and Ann Smith easement and about the box turtles, and everyone said, no, Ann Smith loves the beavers. And I said, no, she loves the box turtles. And that's when I learned she loved beavers and box turtles. And Ann is now passed, Ray is still here, and their easement's pretty spectacular, but I will talk more about that in a moment. So this is a map of southern Ulster County. You can see that green area is Mohawk Preserve. And one of my former board members, Bob Taylor, would always say, if you're at Mohawk Preserve and you're looking out, the Wallkill Valley Land Trust protects that viewshed. We protect those open spaces, trails, and farms. So I don't know where y'all are from, but I'm originally from Miami, Florida. And I can tell you that changed a lot, even before I left. And one of the reasons I love to live up here now, I've been up here 20 years, I get cold in the winter. My southern accent isn't going anywhere, but this area and the preservation of our open spaces, trails, and farms is really what makes all of this so special. So with the Wallkill Valley Land Trust land protection work, we focused on natural resources, historic areas, view sheds, working landscapes, and public access. We are a nationally accredited organization. This is a very, very difficult achievement. It is something for just land trusts. It is like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. And it was a big application. It's not that we were doing anything wrong, it's that there are best practices that we could initiate to make our organization the best possible. It is a 5-year term, so I'm very proud. That's a much younger picture of me. Very proud to have achieved our accreditation in 2016, and we became reaccredited in 2021, and we're up again in 2026. And every time we become reaccredited, it's harder because they expect more from you. But it's a really wonderful process and something I'm very proud of. So what is it that we do? This is a picture of Taliaferro Farm, which is located here in New Paltz. And that's a project that I worked on, and that property is now permanently protected, and I'm going to use the Taliaferro Farm to talk about what an easement is. So when you own land, you have a bundle of sticks. You have rights as to what you can do on that land. So here's Taliaferro Farm. It's 39 acres, rectangle, right over there is the Wallkill. It's hard to point. I don't feel like I'm patting my head and rubbing my stomach here. Right over here is the Wallkill River. Then you've got Plains Road, and right here is the rail trail. So it's adjacent to the rail trail, right along the Wallkill River. And Pete Taliaferro was approached to sell this to a developer and make it a 19-house subdivision, which I'll show you an image of in a moment. And Pete really loved the property. As with most farmers, he's put a lot of love into the land, and he really wanted it protected, but his property was all of his revenue, it's all of his equity. So he needed to make sure that he could survive with putting permanent protections on the property. So on one side, this is the rights, your bundles of sticks that you have as a landowner. And then when you donate a conservation easement, you willingly give up some of those rights. And those things can be subdivision, the ability to mine, the ability to clear cut trees, other actions that you are willingly giving up permanently on the property. So this is a little complex, but I'm going to explain it. Right here along the Wallkill River is a more restricted area. It's called a resource protection area. And in this little strip here, Pete can't do farming. He can't do anything. He has to leave those trees to help protect the bank of the Wallkill River. He can still run his pipe down there and get water, which he does. The remainder of the property is for agricultural use. So he can grow crops. He can put up greenhouses. He can do all the things he needs to be able to run his farm. This little cross-hatched area here is what we call a building envelope. That is around where his existing house is, where his existing barn is, and where the farmers have housing and live. But Pete loves the property so much, he asked to have one more little building area. It can't be subdivided, but one day Pete wants to build a little house here and be able to live here as well. And we allowed it because a lot of our farmed properties don't have places for housing. So it's important that this property has housing available for the farmers to be able to live and work. So he's got two areas where he can build things, and then outside of that, he can just use the property for agriculture. And I have a very, very professionally done drawing of what it might have looked like if he had done the 19-house subdivision. As mentioned, I'm a literature major. This is what it may have looked like if Pete Taliaferro had not done the conservation easement. And Pete really knows now that that property can be protected forever, and his children are now taking over the farm and running the farm, which is very exciting. So a lot of people ask, who would want to do this? I'm very proud of this picture. My grandmother thought this was hysterical. I used to do wildlife rehabilitation, and apparently I'm very animated when I talk. But who would put their property into a conservation easement? This is a picture of Roger Roloff and the late Barbara Peterson. Very, very good friends of the Wallkill Valley Land Trust and of Mohawk Preserve. And they live right over here on Hummel. They purchased a 16-acre property behind their house. It abuts Duzine Elementary, Millbrook Preserve, and their house. It would have been condos. They bought it, and they wanted it protected for the wildlife, the plants, and the flowers. So that property is permanently protected. It cannot be built on. There can be trails, but they really wanted to ensure that the legacy of the land that they love remained in place. There are some tax incentives for putting a conservation easement on a property. And it's most important that people know conservation easement property, where's that map? These easements that we have, these conservation easements, they are still on the tax rolls. A conservation easement does not take a property off the tax rolls. But it does have some tax incentives. So for state property taxes, a landowner of a conservation easement can take a small property tax deduction up to $5,000 a year, every year, and that remains with the property. So the next buyer, 10 buyers later, they still have that small incentive for the conservation easement. There is also a federal tax incentive, which most of our landowners have not taken advantage of, and that is when they get an appraisal of the value of the property before the easement was in place and after the easement was in place, and they take that deduction from their income taxes over a series of years. I have to say, out of our 42 conservation easements since the past 37 years, maybe 8 landowners have taken the federal tax incentive. A lot of them don't, because possibly they're retired, so they don't have income tax to be able to help utilize that deduction. There are some costs involved, and some people can't afford to get the appraisal. But most of our landowners really just want the legacy of the land that they love to remain. So I wanted to today do a little zoom in of our map of protected lands and talk to you about some of the different ways conservation easements come to us. And one is starting with Woodland Pond. I'm pointing a red dot where we are right now in this building. But the Woodland Pond Conservation Easement was a requirement from the zoning department here in New Paltz. They needed a zoning variance in order to build this property. And to do that, they agreed to do a conservation easement. And they worked with the Wallkill Valley Land Trust to do that easement. Now, I don't see other easement owners in here right now. It's one of my favorite easements. Don't tell the other ones. This is some of the most beautiful amphibian habitat I have ever seen. And it's a really spectacular area, and I have a zoom in of this conservation easement. But this easement was because of a zoning variance. But Woodland Pond worked with us to develop a really special project that on either side of where these buildings are permanently protected. Right next to Woodland Pond, I think you all are familiar with the Millbrook Preserve. Have you all heard of Millbrook Preserve? Millbrook Preserve was a challenging project to complete because we were not negotiating with a family. We were negotiating with the town of New Paltz and the village of New Paltz. And that was a lot of personalities in one room. But the end result is both the town property and the village property. This is town property, and just to make it confusing, this down here is town property. And then the rest of this is village property. These are, yes. Sorry. Oh, my goodness. How did that happen? Zach, hold on. You all know it's going the wrong way. Hold on. I was so excited about this clicker. Okay.
You're just trying to prove that you're technically challenged.
I haven't broken it yet. So the Millbrook Preserve easements, they're 2 separate easements. They allow for trails and really focus on protecting the biodiversity of the area. A separate nonprofit, the Millbrook Preserve Association, has been developed, and they volunteer and raise funds to do improvements. But these 2 properties are still owned by the municipality. We have the easement, and the separate nonprofit builds the trails. Right there is Poets Preserve that I talked about a moment ago that also allows for trails. So it's really neat to have these 3 contiguous properties, 4 really if you include the town and village of Millbrook, all next to each other, all permanently protected, right here in New Paltz. Very impressive, over 200 acres. Then you've got the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. The Wallkill Valley Rail Trail New Paltz section was given to the Wallkill Valley Land Trust in 1991, and we immediately put a conservation easement on it, and it's owned by the town and village of New Paltz. So we have 2 easements permanently protecting the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. We have a small property off of the rail trail we call the Weston property. It has a little wooden boardwalk very close to the BOCES building. We own that little 4 acres and that little boardwalk. And then over here, I'll start at the bottom, you have the Nyquist Harcourt Wildlife Sanctuary. That's a property that we hold a conservation easement on, but now we also own it. When Tom Nyquist unfortunately passed in 2019, The family gave us the property, and here in New York State, we are allowed to own a property that we have a conservation easement on. Basically, we know we're not gonna go build a Walmart there, but we do some additional steps to make sure and document that we're following the restrictions of the easement. I'll talk a little bit more about the Nyquist Sanctuary later. Then we have what we call the Two Farms Project. These farms are right off of Huguenot Street. It's the Jewett Farm and also the Khosla Farm. We normally name the properties in unison with the landowner, so these were the original landowners. Both of these properties are active in agriculture. The Khosla easement is the Huguenot Street Farm, CSA. It's very, very popular, and when the easement was developed, the owner brought in a young man, Gavin, and he now still runs the farm to this day. It's been about, easement was established in 2006. He was, like I was, much younger back then, and he still runs that CSA today. Then Jewett Farm actually has an herbalist school in the main building, and they have someone haying the fields. But here again, we are in New Paltz with over 200 acres of permanent protected lands. And one of the reasons that I love this example is it has some different types of easements. So Woodland Pond was a easement because of the zoning variance. The Millbrook Preserve easements are donated through the municipality to benefit the public. Poets Preserve is privately owned, donated easement. You've got the Walcott Valley Rail Trail, municipal owned. You've got the property that we own, Weston. You've got the Nyquist Harcourt Sanctuary, privately donated, now owned by us. And then you have the Two Farms projects. And these two I wanted to highlight because with farming easements, if we're able to get grants and funding, the farmers are paid up front for that value that they're giving up in the easement. So I mentioned that federal tax incentive. For farming, there are grants available where we could give that value of what they're giving up to the farmer at the time of closing. It's what we do at Taliaferro, and it's what we did with both of these properties. These farming grants are set up so that a farmer can receive that value, pay off their mortgage, invest in the farm, and still be very successful. So for these projects, we had grants, raised the funds, the easement is in place, but these farmers did receive funds that they then used to take care of their properties. This is the Woodland Pond Conservation Easement. Area B, which is over here by the Beaver Pond, allows for trails. Area A is far more restrictive, doesn't even allow for trails. And it all surrounds where we are right now. When I first moved here from Miami, Florida, I learned about amphibian migration, and I learned in the spring that the little frogs and salamanders cross roads in order to go to a wet pond area and mate, lay eggs, have offspring. And I had someone bring me out here to Woodland Pond. It had just been built, and I came out and saw the biggest spotted salamanders I have ever seen in my entire life. So that's why this is my favorite conservation easement. I did not bring any of those with me today. So I don't get to go out and check on these easements because that's a big part of the work that we do. These conservation easements that we hold forever, we have to go out and check on them to make sure there's not construction or tree cutting or other things that are not allowed. We have 2 full-time staff members now who go out and monitor our conservation easements. Every single year, they go, visit the property, walk around, take pictures, and if there's no problem, send a little happy letter. But if we go and we find a Walmart sitting over there by the Beaver Pond, then we have a problem. And I only pick on Walmart because everyone knows Walmart. But generally, we don't come across a lot of issues. It is the most important part of our work, and my staff loves to go outside. So you think, oh yeah, they're just wandering around outside with these 41 properties. It's fairly technical. Some easements allow for, like with Pete Taliaferro, he can build another house. So if we go show up and he's built the house somewhere he wasn't supposed to, we again have a problem. So our staff spends a lot of time working with our landowners to make sure that they don't do something that they're not allowed to do before they do it. Besides our conservation easements, we also own property open to the public. These are in yellow on the map, but the map's hard to see, so I wanted to talk about them. One is the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. Now, I mentioned in 1991 we established the New Paltz sections of the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. We maintained ownership of the Gardner section until 2007, when the municipality accepted ownership and we put it into a conservation easement. So Gardner, conservation easement, Town and Village of New Paltz, both conservation easements. When the Land Trust acquired me in 2009, they also acquired the Rosendale and Ulster sections of the rail trail. And I remember at my interview, they said, oh, we just got another half a rail trail. It's about 12 miles. Shouldn't be a big deal. This section that was acquired includes the trestle, which I actually don't even think I have a picture of, the trestle in Rosendale. It's 940 feet long. I know every inch of it, because as Larry mentioned, it was a 4-year, $1.5 million fundraiser with OSI to raise the funds, have it open to the public, and we still own the trestle to this day. If anyone would like to buy it, come right up and talk to us. It's caught on fire twice. Love it. But it's still a very important property, and our public land work allows us to engage with more of our community and raise more funds for private land protection. A lot of our work on our public lands involves volunteers. So I wanted to show off our top volunteer chainsaws. These gentlemen have taken safety courses. I swear they're never home because we have trees that fall every day, and I can call these gentlemen and they're already out there. But they help remove the trees because while we own half of the rail trail and we have easements on the other half, the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail is 22 miles long. I bet you right now a tree just fell. It's constant. So we work with our volunteers and work with our highway department and our community to keep this open so that folks can go on a bike ride with their dog and backpack. We also own Joppenberg Mountain. Joppenberg Mountain is located in Rosendale. It is 118 acres and it was donated to us by OSI. I've always joked, OSI has the money, and I guess they think we have the time because they love to give us properties. Joppenberg Mountain has been a wonderful resource because we've gotten several grants to develop the trails, and we'll talk more about them in a moment. But I wanted to give a special shout out. It was mentioned by Larry that one of my other board members is on the board of Woodland Pond. That's her right there. That's Sally weed whacking on Joppenberg Mountain with her husband Mark. She's not facing the camera, but I had proof. She really helps in all ways.
Sally?
That's Sally Cross, right there. That's Sally weed whacking on Joppenberg. Cross, Sally Cross. And she's on the board of Woodland Pond. So we've had some student interns look at the accessibility of our trails at Joppenberg, and on our website is an accessibility trail where it uses words and describes each one of the trails that are on Joppenberg, and if it's steep, not steep, what the expectations are. So if you go to our website and want to check that out, I wanted to share it with you all because we've really done an exciting job of building these trails up here. I'm going the wrong way again, aren't I? Finally, we have the Nyquist Harcourt Wildlife Sanctuary. It's right over here in New Paltz. It has trails. It is muddy often, and it's a really special place for bird watching and nature observation. And we have several grants right now to help with removing invasive species. And we had a grant that bought us kayaks, and we go out in the muck and remove the invasive water chestnut. And then we take all of it and put it in this truck, and it can be composted, and we take it over to Gardens and Nutrition to put in their compost. It's a multi-year project. It's a lot of dirty work, but we've had so many volunteers show up and have a wonderful time. So while the trails are an important part, keeping them open for public, taking care of the property with removing invasives is also very important to us. And what else do we do besides protecting land forever and keeping it open to the public? We have educational programming. This is on one of our conservation easements, the Willow Pond Sheep Farm in Gardner. And they have a baby sheep program where they let us come and they talk about how they make yogurt and cheese and other things using their sheep. We also work with researchers and do educational signage on our property. And I'm very excited about this project. It's a multi-phase project where it's interpretive signage in both English and Spanish that talks about the use of the property, the railroad history. This one's talking about pollinator pathways. Really exciting, and some more of those signs are going to be installed later this year on the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. The next vision I have is to have some of these signs go up at Nyquist and also at Jackenberg. So in closing, this is the work that we do. Someone asked, is this your paid job? It is. It's nonprofit work. It's not glamorous. That's why I live on the other side of the mountain. But it's really a lot of fun to be a part of the permanent protection of these open spaces, trails, and farms here in Ulster County, getting to know our communities better, and working with everyone to keep this area the way it is. David, you're up. Yes, that is the trestle right there.
And Joppenberg.
Yep, Joppenberg Rail Trail. This is Kiernan Farm, and that is the Jewett Farm. David, you're up.
Okay, so this is the Q&A period, but before we take the cues, two recent things happened here that today Michelle in her weekly address mentioned almost exactly what you said about the relationship between you and us and how there's an annual report, etc. But also, we're doing some trail work down below, and you guys had to endorse that, as from what I understand.
Yes, we did exactly that.
But
in writing.
I'm not Catholic, so I'm not.
Neither am I, it's okay.
No offense intended. So,
Yep.
questions, please.
Okay. Right here. For labor force, do you ever use the Boy Scouts?
We have used the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. We've had them build benches, signage. One young lady wanted to do a bike rack. Some other Boy Scouts wanted to do some places where people could sit down in different observation areas, so we have worked with them, yes.
I was in charge of building trails in the town of Woodland Grange,
Yes,
and
yeah.
we built a trail 1.5 miles long, and it was all done with Boy Scout labor.
That's
And
wonderful.
we had 6 Eagle Scouts, as Eagle Scout partners.
That's wonderful. We've actually had a Boy Scout group team up with a local mountain bike group and build some structures over at Joppenberg where the kids can learn how to do hills and stuff. This Floridian is not going to do it, but the kids seem to have a good time. Their bones are softer, stronger.
As I understand from what you're saying, that the property can be sold. Can you just explain a little bit about that? Do they find it historically difficult to sell their property with the easement, and what's the situation?
So I actually wish Ray Smith was here, because when we negotiated the easement with Ray and Ann, we would play this game where we would all talk in third person. And Ray said, well, Ray doesn't think that any idiot would want to buy this if they can't build a bunch of stuff on it. And then Ann would say, well, Ann and Christy think this property is pretty great, and even with an easement, someone will still buy it. And we did the easement, it sold within a week. And it's a fairly restricted easement to take care of those box turtles. The owners that bought it love the box turtles so much, they still let us do the educational programming. We have some properties that are in their, what we call 4th generation land ownership, so it means it's sold 4 times. They are informed about the conservation easement. The minute they buy it, we show up and make sure that they understand. Every once in a while, someone will get a little grouchy and say, you mean I can't build a hotel here? No. But generally, they know that before they get into it. And we do maintain a stewardship and conservation defense fund, and we're part of a national insurance called Terra Firma. Because if there is an issue with one of our easements, or someone buys it and says, I'll see you in court, we have the backing to be able to stand up to them. It's the less It's the most exciting part of our work, but it's the less fun to talk about publicly. We found Christie's dark side. But for me, it's so important for folks to know this is very serious, and these easements are forever. And if someone says they don't care or decides to violate it, we can and have taken them to court to rectify the issue.
I was wondering if the agricultural aspect includes livestock, horses. I thought it did.
It does. So we have the Kiernan Beef Farm, so we got beef cattle.
Right.
We just closed on a 320-acre parcel that has cows and chickens and ducks and all organic.
My son has what I convinced him to buy some years ago, a 28-acre farm, but it's basically for horses, and he's developing it for the use of cattle as well, and some agriculture, but the agriculture part will be fairly small because of the size of the property. Does that qualify for?
Absolutely. So we have easement acceptance criteria. So any property that's brought to us, we look at the conservation values, agricultural use, all of those things, and then decide. There's some properties that doesn't make sense to have an easement, and there's some that do. But if it's active with horses, and that's totally fine. They gotta go somewhere.
Lastly, I was on the Town of Poughkeepsie Planning Board for some number of years. At any rate, Town of Pleasant Valley across the river is part of the Town of Poughkeepsie. We saw some very interesting similar properties like this that were huge, that became part of the conservatives.
Yes. Yeah, we work with the other land trusts in the area because none of us are making the wheel. We are all very close. And so I know Hudson Highlands Land Trust and Putnam Land Conservancy and Dutchess Land Conservancy, they do some good work over there.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm thinking about the Millbrook Preserve, not the part that is part of Woodland Pond, but beyond that. Is there any limit on the width or the number of trails that can go through there?
Yes, so the Woodland Pond Conservation Easement for both town and village limits the number of the mileage of trails and the width for those trails. So the hiking trails are supposed to be more narrow. There is allowed a multi-use trail that hasn't been developed yet, but there is something, especially where they put that new bridge. That's a very wide bridge. It's because it is, whenever they're ready to do so, they can put a multi-use trail through there, but there's a limit on the mileage and the width for that as well. And the intent was that is we didn't want trails all over it.
I think you said Woodland Pond easement.
I'm sorry, Millbrook Preserve. I got excited
That's
of where
okay,
it
but
was. Thank
because
you.
some people have ideas here.
Yeah, I got excited, but yes, there are width restrictions because I've heard someone say, oh yeah, I'll put in a trail 20 feet wide. That's not a trail, that's a parking lot.
I know that when Williams Lake property was sold, part of that was put into the easement. Are you involved with that?
So that's held by our neighboring Round Otisopus Land Conservancy. They were formed the same year that we were, in 1987. They do more land protection work on the other side of Mohawk Preserve. So we're southern Ulster County, they're the other side of Mohawk Preserve, but we overlap in Rosendale. So we actually hold the trail easement on the rail trail in Williams Lake, and Round Otisopus holds the easement on their conserved property. So we all work together on it.
Do you know anything about the development
Yes.
of Williams Pond, Williams Lake, and how it's proceeding, and is it going to happen?
It is going to happen. They are finally at the stage of building their water treatment plant, which is the most important step for then everything to happen. They had to jump through a lot of hoops because of the environmental impact of the property. There's endangered bat habitat, so there's limits as to when they can cut trees, when they can use motorized equipment in some areas. But if you've been there recently, there's been some big changes, and they are now putting in the water treatment plant. I don't think it'll be done this year. I think next year, and then you'll see a lot more happen fairly quickly.
We have not been on the property, but we drive by periodically, and you always look
Yep,
to see what's happening.
they're still coming.
Other hands? Ralph? Second time around.
Look at you, even keep count. Ooh, he's tough.
The bridge at Rosendale, that they called for fire. How does a bridge like that catch fire? Is it either arson or is it lightning or what?
Neither situation were arson. The railroad ties are soaked in creosote. Creosote is very, very flammable. So when we were doing the trestle restoration, we took the railroad ties and we flipped them long ways. They're very heavy, and environmentally, it's a nightmare to try and dispose of. But every fifth tie was attached to the trestle with a big iron bolt, and they had to shear the bolt off. This was in 2013, on Friday the 13th, I'm not making this up. They sheared the bolt, they went home, and it was smoldering, and it caught on fire. And I remember the date so well, because I was in the city, and I lived in Rosendale at the time. And I was on a bus back, and one of my board members lived in Rosendale. And I was getting all these texts, your trestle's on fire. So I texted my board member. I said, I'm on a bus, but the trestle's on fire. And she said, I'm on a bus too. And she stood up and she was in the front of my bus. And someone yelled out, your trestle's on fire. So fortunately the fire department got there, put out the fire, so that was the first one. The second time was last year. It was Memorial Day weekend, and someone was smoking a cigarette, and they flicked it, and it went between the decking and started to smolder. And it was right over Route 213. So all the fire departments showed up and shot water up. The town supervisor called me, because we own the trestle, and I was at home with my rescued animals, watering my ducks, and said, come right now, your trestle's on fire. And I said, again? So I show up, and I had a little sign in front of my car, and the cops thought I was an Uber driver. And they go, go, it's on fire. I go, no, it's me. And they go, oh, it's on fire. I know, so they put it out quickly. There wasn't any damage, but yes, it's caught on fire twice. And I've learned to always keep tennis shoes by my car, because I was barefoot.
So I'm pleased to see that you're continuing to provide explanatory signage in 2 languages. That's wonderful. I would like to mention that there's one place, and only one place, to the best of my knowledge, along the whole 22 miles of rail trail, which at one time or another I've walked every inch of with my late wife, an event, just south of Water Street Market. There is the one remaining short piece of track. I think that should be cleared back, cleaned up a little bit, and signage put up to recognize what that was once.
I love that you mentioned that. So there is a proposal. It's actually, and I don't know the full history, but it's where one of the trains could pull off to the side and unload. So the rail is still there.
Yeah, I think it was a lumberyard right there.
Yes. So what is proposed to be there is a hotel with a cafe at the bottom. And so we've been very clear with the planning board that they can do whatever they want, that the planning board allows. But on the rail trail, they cannot build, because that would be commercial use, and that's not allowed in the easement. But those tracks are half on the rail trail property and half on this other property. So in order to let them remove a tree or two and help with the drainage a little bit, we said, okay, then you have to pay for an educational sign so we can have some information about those rails. So they're gonna stay there, and I'm making them pay for a sign there. And then the easement won't be violated. So I get a little tricky, yes.
Stick it to them.
I told you I got a dark side.
Other hands? Yeah, sorry.
I have 2 questions. First one is the accessibility. Is there an accessibility trail in Woodland, in near Woodland Pond, where we could be maybe within the next year, that we could be walking, or even maybe taking for people who can't walk, what do you call those things?
Are you referencing the pedicab?
What?
Are you referencing the pedicab?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, That's not her.
That's not her, that's not her, I just yelled that that's not her.
Okay, I'll answer that question.
So the first is, when would that be finished? And the second was I remember when I used to do a lot of hiking and walked a lot in that area, there's a lot of poison ivy near the old trails. So somebody's gotta clean that up, even if it makes the trail too wide. So I just wondered if anybody had given any thought to that.
And which property are you speaking of? You're talking about here at Woodland Pond or Millbrook Preserve? Where, what trails?
Well, the trails, I haven't been able to walk in quite a while, so the trails I used to walk on, I don't remember.
So at Millbrook Preserve, the nonprofit that's helped taking care of that, they are working really hard to try and address the poison ivy because they take kids out there a lot and kids touch everything. But it's really hard to mitigate poison ivy. It's a constant battle. As for accessible trails, where we have conservation easements, we can't go in and I can't build the trails here at Woodland Pond. I can make sure that they're not too wide. I can make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. But I know it's hard with the topography here for accessibility trails, and that's something, I'm not sure how it would be addressed. I also know, many of you know Paul Steely White with New York Parks and Trails, which I think David's gonna speak about. He's become a great friend, and he will always call me when he finds a tree down when he's out with y'all. He calls me directly.
So this fellow, Paul Steely White, you probably know the brief history, he approached Michelle about doing something, and where we are now with that is, he is to provide us dates that he has drivers, and then Jason will publicize those dates to the community, and people can either get a ride through one of the Woodland Pond vans or take themselves down to the backside of, what's that called, place?
Zero Place, yeah, Drive Fly.
Yeah, and that's where the vehicle meets. The last couple of weeks, he hasn't sent us any dates, and Jason was gonna reach out to him last week, and I haven't heard the result. But Jason thinks, I'm gonna speak for him, that in summertime, it's a little harder to get people. It's been so darn hot that maybe his drivers don't wanna volunteer. So, but it's still an active project.
Yes.
And there's a couple of people in the audience who can attest, it's really a nice ride. It's on a rail trail, out and back, or down around town, or through Huguenot Street, Huguenot, if I said it right. People come back with nothing but smiles, and I hope you get a chance to do it soon.
And I'll bug him to respond to you all. I know he has a Parks and Trail ride. They're riding 200 miles over multiple days from Troy all the way down to the city. And I know that because he needed to fill out an event application to ride on my rail trip. So that's how I know what he's up to.
Anybody else? I guess you've said it all. You have some lovely parting
Yes,
gifts?
so I brought some of our newsletters. We do printed newsletters twice a year, and these newsletters that I brought talk about our educational signage. I have a map for the Nyquist Preserve. Also, most recently, I barely talked about a 320-acre parcel that we just closed on. So I brought an assortment. As a literature major, I love paper, sorry trees. So I brought some of those to share. So come up and get some of those if you like. And thank you all so much for being on my favorite list.
And let me add, and perhaps she's not allowed to say this, but I will, they accept donations.
Well, I usually say I take kids, gold teeth, checks, credit card, but yes, we do accept donations. And thank you all so much. Really appreciate it today.
Thank you a lot.
I did. So I guess we'll be here. Which I think is you might be able to figure out who the others
Is the rail and you know the new trail you're putting in here is theoretically the new trail being put here. It's just a redo of the old Well, we have a lot of trails. It's too bad they're not exactly right
You are.
A lot of that area is still a lot of that water
Yeah, exactly. I think we're over close. Okay.
Liquid lead.
Thanks for
We decided to show the original, because there were two trusts there, the original one was the living room, and then they replaced it with the metal one. And what the interesting,
Oh, yeah. No, the way it came out, right when we're sitting down, there's a border, it's a certain thing, right at the my central particular thing, started on the other side. Which is only got down the street between her and yes, they told her, she told me that they don't, they'll give her as well. I think they're gonna restore the same baseline, if you will. Well,